Hello, today I'm going to show you how to make this simple shopping bag. This is a perfect project when you feel the creativity spark but don't want to set up your sewing space, measure things and cut things. We will be doing none of that. We will use a fat quarter bundle, and I got this one in my local Aldi, and we won't even make the handles. We'll just use a ribbon. You can use a twill tape, whatever you have on hand. I have this polyester twill tape, which is actually a little too flimsy, so I'm going to double that, and I'll show you how to do that. Coordinating thread, sewing machine, and maybe half an hour to an hour of time, and we will be done and have great fun. So the bundle that I have has 5 fat quarters inside. What you will need is 4, and we need 2 for the outer, 2 for the lining. Our bag is going to be fully lined, and things don't have to match. We will just go with the flow and let the magic of fabric happen. So I'm at my sewing machine, and the first thing we're going to do, we're going to give our fat quarters a quick press. I've just done that, and I'm going to prepare my handles. Now, depending on what you're using for your handles, you might do a little bit of work before you start. So for this bag, I have used these upholstery tapes that they're nice, thick and strong, so I think they're going to uphold all the shopping that I'm going to be doing in this bag. But for the new one, I'm going to be using this twill tape, and I just feel it's a little bit too flimsy for what I need. You know, all the bottles of wine I'm going to be carrying in the bag. So I'm going to double it. So pretty much what I'm doing, I'm going to cut them at 27 inches. That's how long I like my straps, but I'm quite tall. So you just measure around your arm and see what feels good. As I said, we're not measuring much, we're not cutting anything. This is easy breezy kind of a project. So mine is a little bit shorter, but that's what I have left, and I will work with whatever I have. So pretty much I'm going to just put the long strip together. It doesn't have a right side or a wrong side, so I'm not going to worry about that. I will just make sure it's not twisted. So it's folded there on the end, and I'm just going to stitch it on both sides. So I'm going to stitch fairly close to the edge, and I'm going to set my stitch length to 3.5. I will back stitch at the beginning, and I will just whiz that through. I'm not even pinning anything, I'll just I stitched my twill tape together. As you can see, there's a row of stitching on one side and the other, and the seam allowance is about 1/8 of an inch on each of the sides, and I used 3.5 stitch length on my machine. So I have my long strip prepared. As I said, I prefer them at the 27 inches or 70 centimeters length, but I just had a strip left over and decided to work with what I have. And this one is only 23 inches, but I'm going to roll with it. So I stitched it together in one continuous strip, which it's nice and quick, other than doing it twice. And now I'm going to finger press it in the middle. I folded it in half. I did a finger press, and I'm just going to snip that in half, and that's my handles done. Next, I'm going to pin my outer and my lining pieces, and I have put them together. So these are going to be my outer pieces. So we're pretty much doing 2 bags, which we will then stitch together. So this is my outer bag, and I'm going to put the fabric right sides together, and I'm going to pin on 3 sides, and I'm going to leave this side open because that's where I will be putting all those bottles of wine in. So I pinned my outer fabrics right sides together all around, and now I'm going to move on to my lining pieces. Now, as I said, we're not measuring or cutting anything, we're just going to go with what's in your fat quarter bundle, and sometimes they don't match perfectly, but don't worry about it, it will all work out. We're not in the business of producing perfection, because perfection doesn't exist. So now we're going to pin our lining pieces again, right sides together. Now the only difference in the lining is that we're going to have to leave an opening through which we will flip our bag once it's all made. So we're going to be working on the wrong side of the bag, and we need to leave some sort of an opening so that we can flip it right side out at the end. So I'm going to mark that for myself. I kind of like to use my hand roughly as a guide. I like these openings to be fairly nice and wide, so I don't have to struggle when flipping my bag. And so I'm going to pin all around my lining. So I'm going to stitch my outer pieces together. I'm going to use 2.5 stitch length because it's nice and sturdy, and I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, and at the end, when I get to my corner, I'm going to leave my needle down. I'm going to press my presser foot, and I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to continue sewing to the other corner. So now I'm stitching together my lining pieces, and I just got to the point where I marked my opening. So I'm going to stitch to that marking, okay, and then I'm going to back stitch, and I'm going to move on to the other marking, which is just there. Okay, I'm going to remove that pin because we don't sew through pins, and I'm going to back stitch to my marking, and then I'm going to continue sewing straight. I finished stitching together my lining and my outer. I'm going to clip these threads. Remember when we lifted our presser foot and we didn't bother cutting our threads, so I'm going to do that now. And so what we did, we back stitched at the beginning, then we went all the way to the corner, we left the needle down, we lifted the presser foot up, and then we pivoted, okay? Then we got to the opening, we back stitched here, then we moved on to the other marking, back stitched, pivot, and back stitch at the end. You always back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. If in doubt, back stitch anyway, okay? And for our outer pieces, we did the same thing, with the only exception we didn't leave the opening, because we only need the opening in one of the pieces. Next, we're going to place the straps. So what I have done, I measured 4.5 inches from the my stitch line, and I made a marking, and I did that on the same side, and we will need that marking on the other side of the fabric as well. So what I like to do is make a little notch, just a tiny snip there, so you don't have to transfer the markings, and then we'll pin. Next, we're going to place the straps on the inside of our outer bag, and we are going to place the edge of the ribbon next to that a little snip that we made, the notch, okay? And we're going to pin the strap flush with the edge, like that, and then being very careful not to get it twisted, we'll pin it to the other marking, okay? And again, we're going to place it next to that snip on the inside, flush with the edge. We're going to put a couple of pins, and then we're going to do the same on the other side. Now you're going to tuck your straps to the inside. You can baste them in place if you want, but I'm too lazy to do that. So what we're going to do next, we're going to grab our lining pieces that we stitched together, remembering to leave the opening on the bottom, and we're going to flip the lining right side. The lining is right side out. You really don't have to bother to push these corners out because the bottom of the bag is irrelevant for the time being. We're going to focus on the top. So we're going to slide our lining right side out inside our outer, making sure that the straps are entangled. So my lining is inside, the straps are sandwiched in between my outer and my lining is right side together with the outer fabric. We're going to pin the side seams first. We're going to match these seams, and I like to nest my seams. What that means is I'm going to flip one seam allowance to one side and the other to the other side, and when you run your fingers through here, you'll see this reduces the bulk significantly. I'm going to put a pin in here, and then I'll do the same on the other side. And once the two sides are pinned, I'm going to pin all around. So the top of my bag is all nice and pinned all around, and I'm going to bring it to my sewing machine and stitch it on the round. Now we will be stitching on the round, and we don't have to, because we left the opening on the bottom of the bag, we will just start stitching in one point and come back to the same point. So it doesn't matter where you start, you're going to come back to the same point anyway, and we're going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. We're at the sewing machine now, and we're going to start stitching, and we're going to back stitch at the beginning and then stitch with 2.5 stitch length, and we will stitch with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is the distance between the needle and the edge of the presser foot. So all we worry about is that the edge of the fabric is flush with the edge of the presser foot. Now once you get to where your straps are, as you can see, this is where my strap is placed, you're going to sew through the strap, okay? Once you get to the end of it, you're going to hit reverse, and you're going to go back, stitch through it again, and then forward again. We do that to reinforce the placement of your strap, because if anything is going to snap in your bag, it's going to be the straps. So by stitching 3 times effectively, we are reinforcing our strap placement. So I am finishing on, and I'm going to get to the same point where I started. I'm going to overlap my stitches ever so slightly and back stitch at the end. So the top of our bag is stitched all around, our strap are reinforced, and now we're going to reach in and pull out the lining out of the bag, and we're going to mark the corners to box the bottom of our bag. So what do I mean by boxing the corners? You have just stitched your outer and your lining together, and you could finish at that and have a perfectly good bag, like a flat tote. But what I want for my bag is for it to have a little bit of a depth on the bottom, because I think it's important for things in life to have a bit of depth. So mine measures 5 inches, okay? So what we're going to, so whatever the bottom of the bag, whatever you want for your bag to measure on the bottom, you divide in half. So in my case, that's 2.5 inches. So I'm going to grab a ruler, and I'm going to mark 2.5 inch squares, but I'm going to measure my 2.5 inches from the stitch line here. As you can see, I measured 2.5 inches from the stitch line to here, and I I'm going to cut these corners out, like so. And once you measure one and cut it out, you can use this as a template to cut the rest of them. You need to do that on all 4 corners. That's why we flipped out the bag like that to create a giant pillowcase-like shape. So I marked the squares on all of the 4 corners. I'm going to cut them out. And why do I do that? So how are we going to get the depth from this square is by pulling it out and matching the seam, and see, that creates depth of your bag, as if by magic. So I'm a little bit of a lazy seamstress, and if I can take a little shortcuts to do a little bit of less work, I will do that. So what I'm going to do in the next step, I'm going to pin and stitch my corners together. So I'm going to stitch my right corner to the right corner, these two, and my left corner to my left corner, for both outer and the lining, and I'll show you exactly how I do that. So I'm going to take one of my corners and I'm going to match the seams in the middle, and I'm going to nest my seams like we did before. I'm going to flip one seam allowance to one side and the other to the other side. I'm going to put a pin in the middle and I'm going to match my corners. I'll put a pin in there and on the other side as well. Okay, and then I'm going to grab my other right corner, okay, and I will do the same thing. I will find the center, I will nest my seams, and now I'm going to bring the corner I already pinned. I will match the centers. I will transfer this pin. See how many layers I have here, so all the middles are matched together, and then I'm going to match the side. I'm going to transfer that pin and pin them together, and I'll do the same on the other side. Okay, so that is my 2 corners pinned together. Okay, I have nested all of my seams because there's quite a bit of bulk here, so you want to nest your seams so your machine is happy with you. Sometimes they don't like sewing through all the bulk. Okay, and I'm going to stitch this with 2.5 stitch length and 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now it will create a shape that looks all wrong, okay, so ignore that instinct of yours to think, oh, this is all wrong. It's not. Now if you get confused and don't know what to pin with what, just pull it out on your table, on your floor, or whatever space you have, and lay it in front of you flat, and then things will start making sense and you will see the left and the right. So I'm going to pin the other side together just like I did it here. Now guys, if there's anything that's difficult in this very easy project is this part, so don't worry if you get frustrated, just go back on this video and trace your steps, but I'm going to do this again. So I pinned my left corner, I put the pin in the middle, I matched the seams, I nested my seams, I put one pin on one side and one on the other, and then I'm going to bring the other of my corners. I will do the same thing. I will find the center, I'll nest my seams, flip one seam allowance to one side, the other to the other side. I'm not going to put a pin in there because I am going to bring it to the one I've already pinned. I will match the center, and I will transfer that pin. You can use clips here if you find this too bulky. I find these little guys very helpful if I'm pinning through a lot of layers. And now I'm going to match the sides. Okay, one corner and the other corner. Now what you will get is something looking like that, and all your instincts will tell you you did something wrong, but you didn't. So just ignore them, bring this to the sewing machine and stitch where you pinned, and it's all going to work out. So we're going to stitch our corners together. We're going to back stitch and then go all the way. Take it easy, go slow, okay? And don't forget to back stitch, okay? And we'll do the same on the other corner. Phew, that was tough, wasn't it? So you have something like this with your corners stitched together. It makes no sense whatsoever. Now find your opening, the little space that you left in your lining, and we're going to give it a little press to prepare it for turning. So I found my opening, so you can see my markings there. I'm going to give it a little press, and now I'm going to give it a little memory crease there. So you see where I ended my stitches? I'm going to just pull on that, and the middle section will just want to lie flat for me there. This fabric is 100% cotton and presses absolutely beautifully, okay? So we're going to give it a little press, okay? And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And this will just make stitching that hole together in the next step much easier. And believe it or not, you're one stitch away from finishing. How easy was that? Okay. This is the exciting bit. So we have our opening nicely pressed and ready to go. And we are going to reach through the opening and flip the whole thing right side out, and your bag will be born. This is my favorite part. This is when your creation becomes. So I flipped it and give it a good shake, and yeah, it looks like a bag. So we have another couple of things to do. Actually, we're 2 stitches away, and one is optional. So we're going to stitch this opening together, okay? Remember, we gave it a little memory crease, and now it's going to be super easy to pin this together. See how nice and crisp and flat that is? So I like to put a pin at the beginning of that opening so that I know where to start stitching. I'm going to start stitching slightly beyond that and then keep on going. And I'm going to put another pin at the end of the opening, and maybe one in between. Why not? Pins, yeah, pins are your friends. The more pins you put, the easier your work is going to be. So I'm going to bring this to the sewing machine and stitch this. So remember, I put that pin at the start of the opening, so I'm going to start stitching slightly beyond that. I'm going to back stitch a little bit, and I'm stitching very close to that edge, about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to go slow because it's a little tricky to be stitching so close to the edge. I'm going to remove that pin because we don't stitch through the pins, and I'm going to sew all the way there and back stitch at the end. So I'm done stitching my opening. I did stitch it, sorry, it will be better visible on this side. So I put my stitches fairly close to the edge here, and that's nice and shut. If you want a neater finish, or for your bag to be kind of fully reversible, you can do that by hand and put some invisible stitches, but I'm too lazy for that, and I don't care for the neatness that much. You can push your corners. Now these corners are going to be super neat, and because you stitch them together, and the lining isn't going to flap out of your bag. So I will turn it right side out and marvel at my beautiful work. And we are nearly there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to give it a press so that my edges are nice and sharp. And the last bit, which is optional, I'm going to put a little top stitch on the top, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Okay, so I gave my bag a good press. I think she's beautiful. So the last point of protocol is to do a top stitch. Mainly we do that because it looks pretty. I did, for my sample bag, I put 2 rows there, but what it does as well is it just reinforces our straps a little extra as well. As I said, is if there's anything that's going to snap in that bag, it's going to be them straps. So I'm going to bring this to the sewing machine now and put a row of top stitch all around my bag. So at my sewing machine now, and the last point of protocol is to put a row of top stitch. I have set my stitch length to 3.5, mainly because it looks prettier. I'm going to back stitch, and then I will stitch all around my bag. So I didn't even cut my threads, and I'm going to put another row of stitches. You don't have to do that, it's completely optional, but I think it looks pretty. And there you have it, your very own beautiful handmade shopping bag. I hope it will give you as much joy as it gave me. I hope you give my tutorial a go and create one of your very own and enjoy my little shortcuts. And if you do follow my tutorial, please tag me on Instagram. I am at Joanna's Feeling Crafty on Instagram, and I would love to see your creations as well. And go on, make a bag of your own. It will take no time whatsoever.